The first night at the motel, my younger son looked at me and asked, "Dad, are we poor now, or is this just for a few days?" I didn't answer him right away. I just kept wiping dust off a bedside table that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The whole room smelled stale, like it had been closed off and forgotten for a long time. After a few seconds, I finally said, "It's just for a little while. We're going to figure things out, all right?" He nodded like he understood what I meant, but I could tell he didn't fully get it. Honestly, I wasn't sure I did either. That was really the moment everything started to feel real. Not the will, not my father's death, but standing there in that room, trying to make it seem normal for my kids when it clearly wasn't. My name is Mark. I'm 36 and I have 2 sons. Up until a few weeks ago, I thought I had things under control. Then everything shifted in a way I didn't see coming. 3 weeks earlier, I was sitting in a polished office while a lawyer went through my father's will. He had built a decent portfolio over the years, and everyone in the room knew there was something valuable to divide. My sister Vanessa got the downtown apartment complex, fully occupied, steady income, the kind of property people work their whole lives to get. What I got didn't even register properly at first. A roadside motel, the kind of place you drive past without even looking twice, hoping you never have to stop there. I remember looking at the lawyer, expecting him to explain it differently, like maybe there was more to it. He just moved on like it was completely normal. Vanessa didn't say much, but she didn't need to. The way her husband leaned back in his chair and the way he smiled, it made it clear they already knew how this was going to turn out. Lisa was sitting next to me, my wife. She didn't react immediately either, but I could feel something change. It was subtle, but it was there, like something had shifted between us and neither of us wanted to acknowledge it yet. The drive home was quiet. Not calm, just quiet, in a way where both people are thinking the same thing, but avoiding saying it out loud. That night, Vanessa and her husband came over, along with my aunt. It was supposed to be a simple dinner, but the conversation kept circling back to the same topic: properties, investments, future plans. At one point, Lisa let out a short laugh and said, "Well, at least one of us walked away with something that actually makes sense." She glanced toward Vanessa as she said it. No one corrected her. No one even tried. I should have said something right then. I didn't. I just let it sit there like it didn't bother me, even though it did. After everyone left, the house felt different. Same space, same furniture, but heavier somehow. Lisa didn't wait long before bringing it up again. She leaned against the counter and said, "Mark, be honest with yourself for a second. A motel. Do you really think that's going to lead anywhere?" I replied, "It's still property. It's not like it's nothing. Maybe there's more to it than we see right now." Even as I said it, I knew it didn't sound convincing. She shook her head and said, "Your sister just secured her future with something stable and valuable, and you ended up with a place that looks like it's already falling apart. You can't seriously think that's equal." That hit harder than I expected, mostly because part of me was already thinking the same thing. I tried to explain it, said something about location, potential, maybe even future development, but I didn't really have anything solid to stand on. She listened for a moment, then cut me off. "Mark, you don't have to defend it. Just be realistic about what it is." Then she paused, like she was deciding how far to take it, and finally said, "If that's what your father left you, then maybe you should go there and actually deal with it. Take the boys and figure it out from there." There was no anger in her voice, no raised tone. She said it calmly, like it was the most logical solution. That made it worse. I waited for her to take it back, to soften it, but she didn't. She just stood there, completely serious. So I left. I packed a couple of bags, woke the kids without explaining much, and drove out of the city while they kept asking questions I didn't have clear answers to. I told them it was temporary, that we just needed a little time. And now here I was, standing in that motel room, trying to make it feel livable. Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep, I went back to the front office. The place didn't feel completely abandoned, but it definitely felt neglected, like someone had stopped caring halfway through maintaining it. Papers were still stacked on the desk, old guest logs left open, and a single lamp was somehow still working. I sat behind the counter in a chair that used to belong to my father, and that part hit harder than I expected. I started opening drawers, not because I had a plan, but because I needed something to focus on. Most of what I found was useless. Old receipts, outdated forms, things that hadn't mattered in years. Then I noticed something that didn't match the rest of the room. A small cabinet behind the desk. It looked newer, cleaner, completely out of place compared to everything else. And the key was just hanging there on a nail right next to it. That didn't make sense. I stood there for a moment looking at it, trying to figure out why something like that would be left in plain sight. It wasn't exactly fear, but there was a strange feeling that whatever was inside wasn't random. I picked up the key, unlocked the cabinet, and opened it. Inside were folders, envelopes, a rolled-up map, and a locked metal box. That's when it hit me. Maybe this place wasn't as worthless as everyone thought. I didn't open everything at once. There was something about the way the cabinet was organized that made me slow down, as if it had been arranged deliberately, rather than just tossed together. The first thing I picked up was the rolled map. It showed the entire motel property in clean, precise lines. Buildings, parking lot, even the empty stretch of land behind the last row of rooms. But what caught my attention wasn't the motel itself. It was a thick line drawn across the back, something that clearly didn't match the current layout. I set the map aside and reached for one of the envelopes. Official city markings. At first it made little sense, but as I read, certain words kept repeating. Expansion, highway corridor, zoning review. I opened another letter, then another. Same type of content, different dates. Some of them were incredibly recent. My father had been seriously ill when these arrived, yet he was still involved with this property. That didn't add up. As I read on, the letters shifted in tone. They weren't just city updates anymore. Some were from private companies, developers expressing interest in the land. One envelope was thicker than the rest. Inside was a formal offer. I read the number once, then again more slowly. It didn't make sense. This much for a place like this, barely functional, looking like it had been abandoned for years. I leaned back, glancing again at the map. That line behind the motel. I traced it carefully, trying to see if I'd missed something. There was something about it that didn't match the current layout, something deliberate. I went back to the letters and read them more closely. That's when it clicked. Hidden in the formal wording was the real detail, a planned highway extension. At first it hadn't been finalized. There had been reviews, delays, revisions, but eventually it had been approved, and not years ago, recently. At that point I understood. The motel itself wasn't the valuable part. It was the land behind it. At the bottom of the cabinet lay a small, locked metal box, heavier than it looked. For a moment, I thought I might have to force it open, but then I remembered one of the envelopes. There it was, a tiny key I'd missed before. I slid it in, and the lock clicked open without resistance. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, handwriting I recognized instantly. My father's. I sat down before opening it, almost instinctively, as if I needed to absorb it properly. The note was simple, direct. Exactly how he always explained things. He didn't overcomplicate anything. He wrote that everything, even the way the will was structured, had been done intentionally. He mentioned Vanessa, said she understood assets, but that I understood timing. That was the difference. Then he explained the motel. Not what it was now, but what it was about to become. According to him, the highway project would proceed as planned. Once it did, the land behind the property would be the key. Offers had already come in, and he'd turned them down, not because they were bad, but because they were too early. I could almost hear his voice as I read, "Don't rush it, let them come to you." At the end, he wrote that I'd understand when the time was right, that I'd know when to move and when to wait. I stayed there a long while after finishing the note, thinking it over. Everything that had seemed random, the will, the reactions, the way it was presented, it all had a purpose. It had been designed to look like a mistake. I looked around the office again. It didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt paused, waiting for the right person to pick it up at the right moment. Carefully, I put everything back the way I found it and locked the cabinet again. Not to hide it, but because I wasn't ready to tell anyone. If this was real, rushing would ruin it. When I stepped outside, nothing looked different. The motel was still worn, the sign flickered, the parking lot empty. But behind it, that stretch of land felt completely different now. For the first time since I left my house, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I actually had, and when the right time would come to use it. The next morning, I didn't rush into anything. Finding those documents didn't mean much unless they were actually backed by reality, so I decided to confirm it before making any decisions. I called the city planning office, gave them the address, and waited while they checked the records. After a few seconds, the woman on the line said, "Yes, that property is part of the highway expansion zone. The project was officially approved last month, and preliminary work should begin within the next few months." I asked her, "So there's no chance of this being delayed or cancelled at this point?" She replied, "At this stage, it's moving forward. There's already been interest from developers in that entire area." That was enough to confirm everything. This wasn't just potential anymore. It was already in motion. Later that day, I called one of the development companies mentioned in the letters. A man answered and introduced himself as Ryan. I explained who I was and mentioned the motel. Ryan paused for a moment, then said, "We've actually been trying to reach the previous owner for quite some time. We knew that location would eventually become important." I told him, "That would have been my father. He passed away recently, so I'm handling everything now." His tone shifted immediately. "I'm sorry to hear that. In that case, it would make sense for us to meet and discuss this properly, because there's definitely interest on our side." We set up a meeting for Friday. On Thursday evening, Lisa called. It was the first time I'd heard from her since I left. Her voice wasn't as sharp as before, but there was still a controlled tension in the way she spoke. She said, "Mark, I've been thinking about this and I don't understand how you're planning to manage staying out there. You don't have a stable income right now, and that place isn't exactly livable long term." I looked outside at the boys playing and replied, "I understand how it looks, but I'm not as stuck as you think I am. I just need a little time to sort things out properly." She sighed slightly and said, "Vanessa is closing a major investment deal this week. You should come by and see how things actually work at that level. It might help you think more practically about your situation." I let a second pass before replying, "Maybe I'll stop by." And then I ended the call. Friday morning, Ryan arrived with 2 associates. None of them reacted to the motel the way I expected. They didn't laugh, and they didn't look dismissive. Instead, they walked the property carefully, checking measurements, looking at the land behind the building, and discussing access points like it actually mattered. When we sat down in the office, Ryan leaned forward slightly and said, "Once the highway exit is completed, this entire stretch becomes a high-value commercial zone. Locations like this don't stay unnoticed for long." I nodded and said, "I had a feeling this wasn't just about the motel itself." He gave a slight smile, then placed a folder on the desk. "We're prepared to make a serious offer today, so you have something concrete to consider." I opened the folder and read through it carefully. For a moment, I thought I had misread the number, so I went through it again more slowly. It wasn't just a good offer. It was far beyond anything I had expected. I closed the folder and looked at him. "I'm going to need a little time to think this through properly. I don't want to rush a decision like this." Ryan nodded immediately. "That makes sense. Take a couple of days and let us know. We're not in a hurry, but we are very interested." After they left, my phone buzzed. It was the family group chat. Vanessa had sent a photo from a high-end restaurant sitting with investors. Lisa was there too. The caption read, "Finally working with real assets." I looked at the message for a moment, then typed a reply. "Let's have dinner on Sunday. My treat." Sunday night, we met at a similar restaurant. Same kind of setting, same people, but the dynamic felt different this time. Vanessa smiled as I sat down and said, "So, have you adjusted to motel life, or are you already planning your way back?" I replied calmly, "It's been quieter than I expected, which actually helped me think more clearly about a few things." Lisa looked at me and said, "I still don't understand how you're so calm about all of this. Most people would be trying to fix the situation as quickly as possible." I answered, "That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just not doing it the way you expect." Vanessa leaned forward slightly and asked, "What does that mean?" Instead of explaining directly, I placed the folder on the table and said, "It means I received an offer for the property." Lisa frowned and said, "An offer for the motel? From who exactly?" I replied, "From a development group that's been tracking that area for a while now." She shook her head slightly and said, "Mark, that doesn't really make sense. That place doesn't have that kind of value." I slid the folder toward them and said, "That's what I thought too. Just take a look." Vanessa opened it first and started reading. At first, her expression stayed neutral, but as she went through the numbers more carefully, her face changed. She handed it to Lisa without saying anything. Lisa read it, then looked back at me and said, "This number. This is way higher than what that property should be worth. There has to be something else behind it." I nodded and said, "There is. It's not about the motel itself. It's about the land behind it and what's about to happen in that area." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, still processing, and said, "That's actually more than what my properties are bringing in right now." I replied, "I'm aware of that." Lisa looked at me more seriously now and asked, "Did you know about this before any of this happened?" I shook my head and said, "No, but my father did. He just made sure I would figure it out at the right time." After that, the table went quiet. No one really had anything to say. 2 months later, I finalized the deal. Not completely. I kept a percentage in the development so I wouldn't just walk away with a one-time payout. That same week, I filed for divorce. Lisa didn't react the way she had before. She just looked at me and said, "If there's still a chance to talk this through properly, we should at least try." I paused for a moment, then said, "I think we already had that conversation when I left." After that, things moved quickly. Construction began, the area started transforming, and the value kept rising. The motel itself is gone now, replaced by something completely different. But the land, and what it became, is still mine. Looking back, my father didn't give me the smallest asset. He gave me the one that required patience and timing. And the night Lisa told me to go live in that motel, she thought she was pushing me out of her life. She didn't realize she was sending me exactly where I needed to be.